Literacy. Turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation. Connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple of national town halls broadcasting live from Los Angeles, to which you will be invited. And we'll be rolling out a robust social media campaign on all our platforms, as well as an outdoor media campaign, all designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you in our fight for climate justice.
We want cleaner air.
Caring about the community means caring about the climate. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world if we care enough. 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 If we care enough.
If I could give you the world on a silver platter, would it even matter? You'd still be mad at me. If I could find in all this a dozen roses, which I would give to you, you'd still be miserable. In reality, I'm gonna be who I be, and I don't feel no fault for all the lies that you bought. You can try as you may, break me down, but I say that it ain't up to you. Gonna do what you do. Hate on me, hater, now or later, 'cause I'm gonna do me. You'll be mad, baby. Go ahead and hate on me, hater. I'm not afraid.
In this hour, what's up with all the hate on Dr. King? Love that track by Jill Scott. You may have heard me tell this story before. If you have, I'll tell it again. I've been in a few music videos in my time. Friends of mine who've asked me to appear in music videos, and I'm actually in this video. If you Google the "Hate on Me" hater song from Jill Scott, and you'll see Dr. West and yours truly dancing, literally dancing behind Jill Scott. I was in my office here one day at the studio, and Jill Scott just popped up in my lobby one day and blew everybody's mind. My staff was like, "You're not going to believe this. Jill Scott is in the lobby." I said, "Stop lying." Just so happened that Dr. West was in the building that day visiting me as well. And Jill came back to my office, and we were just all shocked. And she said, "Man, I didn't know your office was here." I said, "Yeah." I said, "What are you doing here, Jill?" She said, "I'm shooting a video down the street for my new single." And long story short, she begged us to be in this video. She begged me. Dr. West was down with it immediately. He couldn't wait to be in the video. If you know Dr. West, you may not know about him, but Dr. West can dance literally all night long. He's a scholar, but he loves music and loves to dance. And I tried to get out of it, and Dr. West said, "Brother, we got to do this, brother. We got to do this." So we went down the street and choreographed a little something, something. And if you see that video for that single, Dr. West and I are in the background dancing behind one Jill Scott. Got caught the same way with a couple other artists that pulled me into things that I probably had no business being in. But I love that track. And it's a perfect song that Miles chose because we're talking in this hour about the hate on Dr. King. I am pleased to be joined now by my colleague here at my home station in L.A., KBLA Talk 1580. His program is heard on the weekends. It's called The Reconstruction Project. His name is John Wood Jr., so he's a colleague and a friend. He's also a columnist for USA Today and the founder of Braver Angels. He joins us now for a conversation about efforts by both conservative activist Charlie Kirk and billionaire hedge fund manager Bill Ackman. I think it's fair to say to demean and discredit Dr. Martin King Jr. by casting aspersion on his work and his witness. And so I ask in this hour, what's up with all the hate on Dr. King? And I'm pleased to welcome live into this studio my friend, colleague, and brother, John Wood Jr. John, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, Tavis. It is always an honor and a pleasure. And, yeah, man, I'm just down the street. So anytime you call, brother, I'm not far.
We are happy to have you come in studio. Miles was teasing me earlier, and we never know how these shows are going to work out, but it's Black Republican Day around here.
I saw you.
I just talked to Will Hurd.
Yeah.
And now here you come in. I love, again, talking to my friends who see things a bit differently than I. But on this issue, John Wood Jr. and I are in lockstep. We are simpatico on this. This audience knows full well, as does John, that I regard Dr. King as the greatest American this country's ever produced. I will say it until I die. That's who he is to and for me, and I have a hard time processing the way these folks are coming after him in real time, particularly around a moment like this where we're celebrating, of course, his birthday, his holiday, as we push toward Black History Month. They're very particular about the timing of these attacks on Dr. King. I want to spend a little time just sort of unpacking this. So let me do this. I'm going to ask you, before we jump too deeply in this, to set up. I'll set up the Bill Ackman thing in a moment.
Sure.
I'll let you set up the Charlie Kirk thing right now. We got about 2 minutes to do that. So set up this Charlie Kirk thing, this conservative activist who's gone after Dr. King. Lay the foundation in 2 minutes, and we'll jump when we come forward.
It's an interesting thing. Charlie Kirk is the founder of an organization called Turning Point USA. He's a person who has a large conservative following across America. He's very much a strong supporter of Donald Trump. And if you go back a couple of years, Charlie Kirk was referring to Martin Luther King Jr. as a hero, and doing what many people do, mentioned that King said, judge us by the content of our character, not the color of our skin, and sort of anchored a large part of his sort of social commentary on that. Now, I'm not sure what exactly triggered the shift, but somewhere along the way, Charlie Kirk decided that maybe Dr. King was in fact the villain. And so he's built a campaign that he launched on King Day, starting with a podcast interview of a brother who, honestly, I wasn't familiar with before. I think a man named Vince Everett Wilson, I think. Black conservative who himself kind of has it out for Dr. King and his legacy. And Kirk is essentially saying that not only was Dr. King a fraud and a bad person, but he is the father of the sort of DEI complex, which is not popular on the right, to be certain, and in some other places. And by the way, the Civil Rights Act was a bad thing too. And so there's a bit of a revival of a lot of the old school claims of Dr. King being a communist and somebody who in secret hated America, this, that, and the third.
And while Charlie Kirk was doing that on Turning Point, Bill Ackman was doing that with Elon Musk in an interview on X, formerly Twitter. So it was an attack that seems coordinated. Got this billionaire hedge fund manager talking to Elon Musk about this in an interview on X. Bill Ackman's the guy that helped push out Claudine Gay as president of Harvard. So they're over there on X doing their thing. Charlie Kirk is doing his thing on Turning Point, as John Wood Jr. just said. What's up with all these well-to-do white men coming after and hating on Dr. King? Just getting started with John Wood Jr. on Tavis Smiley.
From Leimert Park with love, this is Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do Black history every single day. In fact, As the only Black talk radio station west of the Mississippi, we are Black History. Our annual Black History Month luncheon is fast approaching, and we want to be sure to give you ample time to get your company, organization, church, or group to join us at this year's celebration on the last day of the month, Thursday, February 29th at noon. Last year, we honored iconic local Black media personalities, including Pat Harvey, Jim Hill, Mark Brown, Beverly White, Sandy Banks, and Pat Prescott, and raised $20,000 in scholarships. This year, we're honoring Black Hollywood creatives who have used their artistic genius as climate justice champions. At this year's luncheon, we will be showcasing and sharing their inspiring work on our big screen. Plus, a scrumptious meal, live music, great company, and lots of fun with your favorite KBLA Talk 1580 hosts. So contact us today at info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. That's info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. We hope to see you Thursday, February 29th as we close out Black History Month. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Who do you trust to get at the truth?
Tavis Smiley.
That's who. The conversation continues right now.
It does indeed with John Wood Jr., who is a USA Today columnist, notable figure in bridging political divides, the founder of Braver Angels, which we'll discuss later, perhaps in this hour. But he has been taken aback, as I have been taken aback, by these well-to-do white males who are coming after Dr. King. And it seems to be coordinated, the attack, and it seems to have an end and aim. And it seems to me that the end and aim is DE&I. And we could debate DE&I, and I'm not sure John and I'm not sure we agree on this thing completely. We'll talk about that. I can handle it, and he can handle it. But at the end of the day, what I don't like is using King as this whipping post, as it were, to go after corrective programs like DE&I, to go after corrective programs, as I see it, like affirmative action. And so we'll talk about that as we move through this hour. But let me turn back to you, though. Tell us more about, you laid the foundation because we had a few moments there. Now we got more time. Yeah. Tell me about Charlie Kirk and what he's up to.
Yeah, so Charlie Kirk, who, again, was an individual who, a popular conservative commentator, somebody who's a strong cheerleader for Trump and whatnot, but also pretty well out on the right. Just not too long ago, a few years ago, was referring to Dr. King as a hero. And over the course of the last few years, seems to have had a change of opinion on Dr. King, but he's launched this larger effort to destroy King's reputation and legacy, claiming to tell the real truth about Dr. King. So I went and I listened to his first podcast, which I guess is supposed to be the first of any number of episodes on this subject. He was interviewing a man who I wasn't really familiar with before, a brother named Vince Ellison, I think, black conservative. But I was wondering if I was going to hear something new. You know, I was wondering, am I going to hear something? Because there's so much confidence in the presentation, in the buildup, that this is going to be something to tear down the legacy of Dr. King. And instead, what we got out of that conversation, and people can listen to it if you want to, but I'm just going to tell you what I found in it was a combination of some flat-out falsehoods, claims that David Garrow, King's biographer, and Ralph Abernathy said that Dr. King was a despicable human being. I think that's just a flat-out lie. claims that Dr. King supported breaking up the family through welfare, right? This is actually something that King, who was generally politically to the left, was actually critical of, right? King is quoted as having criticized that aspect of the Great Society. So that's either a confusion or an outright deception. Some things
the latter. Go ahead.
Some things that there's mentioning of some things that do point to shortcomings of King's, but that's things that we already knew about. The fact that Dr. King, of course, had multiple affairs and so forth. Yes, we know this. Dr. King was a human being, like all of us, had his failings. And so then the bulk of the conversation wound up becoming sort of blaming King for the expansive government policies that conservatives tend to have an issue with anyway. Making the claim that, the welfare state, the Great Society undermines the black family, so on and so forth. Talks about Dr. King's associations with Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, as if Dr. King had a big pro-abortion agenda or what have you. Basically reviving conflations and whatnot for things that either just tangentially had to do with King or didn't have anything to do with King at all. But for the sake of crafting a narrative, it seems to me, we're drawing these associations in ways that are sort of red meat for political conservatives. And I say this as a Republican myself, Tavis, and somebody who has, conservative views on things. But there was very little new in this revelatory sort of campaign from Charlie Kirk, from my vantage point.
I'm not naive at all in asking this particular question, but I want to get your take on it.
Yep.
Why are they, and we'll talk more about the they, but why are they in this moment making MLK a target?
I should say that Charlie Kirk did experience a fair amount of backlash online from many Republicans, from many conservatives, right? So he's by no means experiencing sort of a unanimous reception here. But it's true that you do have a deep pocket of folks on the right, and King has critics from other quarters, but on the right, who I think have a vested interest in tearing down King's legacy, I suppose because they see him as essentially empowering the forces of multiculturalism that in various different ways they see as a threat to whatever it is they understand America as needing to be. So
attacking him is a strategy that is essentially a means to an end.
It is a means to an end. Now look, there's so much propaganda and misinformation out in the world that I have no doubt that there are a number of people now, as was the case in the past, who believe some of the worst things that they hear about Dr. King just because of who that information is coming from, right? So I have no doubt that that's the case. But zooming out, I do think that it is a means to an end. Fairly or unfairly, Kirk has the idea that you cannot destroy DEI without destroying Dr. King because he associates DEI with the legacy of Dr. King. Now that's an interesting sort of claim unto itself, and maybe you and I could talk a little bit about that.
Let's do it now.
Okay, sure thing. Yeah, I mean, I do think that. So, I know you want to talk about. Bill Ackman. Happy to do that too. I wasn't sure that Ackman was doing what Kirk was doing. Let me just offer this as a general statement.
Sure.
I think that there are many people in America who praise King but have what I would refer to as a complacent understanding of Dr. King, right? In other words, they praise him insofar as certain elements of what he talked about that are quickly accessible without any deep study or investigation line up with whatever their political priors might happen to be, right? And you might be challenged on some of those assumptions if you were to dig deeper and further into King's.
That's why I think, not to cut you off, that's why I think the word complacent is both charitable and generous on your part, but I digress. Go ahead.
Yeah, I lean towards the generous interpretation, Tavis, as you know. But at the same time, of course, not blind to the human capacity for mendacity. So that's a balance we strike, and it's a balance King talked about as well. But I think that there are many people, right and left, by the way, just in different ways, who take aspects of things that King said and did, and just kind of the way we treat Jesus, cherry pick from the scriptures and whatnot.
That's right.
To fill out and substantiate and undergird our own preferences and prejudices in terms of how we see the world and how we live our lives. My experience in studying Dr. King is that the more you study him, the more you realize that King in his own time and in the implications of his work challenges everybody across the spectrum because King had a way of looking at things that tended to transcend political categories, even as he had his policy preferences, which brings me to DEI. What I would say about King with respect to DEI, first of all, I mean, I do think that there is a bit of a historical connection between the landscape of diversity, equity, inclusion work and the aftermath of the Civil Rights Act and a larger sort of campaign of affirmative action, integration in American corporations, college campuses, and so forth. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that in principle, Dr. King would have been firmly supportive of the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, it's almost a restatement of some of the fundamental principles of the beloved community. And so on that fundamental level, I think that Mr. Ackman is mistaken. Now, I would say this, however, about DEI, because I think that King would have been in favor of DEI in principle. I think in practice, it is a somewhat more complicated matter. There are a couple of different ways that DEI, I think, can go wrong. And I say this as a person who is involved in producing work through Braver Angels, an organization that you mentioned. Not the founder of Braver Angels, but I'm national ambassador and the person who named the organization, and so deeply involved. We do a lot of work that is rather akin to DEI, and I've had many folks and organizations reach out to me for advice and consultation on those sorts of practices. DEI, I think, goes wrong in a couple different ways sometimes. On the one hand, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, can sometimes be implemented in a way that really is only embracing the first of those terms, the diversity part, right? And so you have a number of organizations and institutions in America who put themselves forward as having a DEI program that's serious, but really is more or less a glorified sort of tokenism, trying to get the right sort of color ratio in the room without any deeper sort of integration or empowerment. And so Dr. King was opposed to integrating people out of power, right? And so in the latter part of his life, Dr. King even said that in certain cases, temporary segregation might be beneficial if the alternative to that is an integration that doesn't allow a meaningful voice for the people of color being brought to the table in a certain institution. And that's a position he came to after having witnessed that happen over and over again. And so that's the failure of DEI that oftentimes draws criticism from the left. There's another way in which DEI can be implemented that is more likely to draw criticism from the right and from the center. And it is an approach to DEI that I would say emphasizes the diversity and the equity portion, but isn't meaningful on the inclusion front. And what do I mean by that? In the summer of 2020, I had a lot of people reach out to me, black and white and different colors from different agencies and organizations across the country, who were struggling to implement DEI programs that actually achieved genuine sort of social cohesion in their organizations. And so I wound up interviewing a good number of DEI practitioners, learning everything I could about the programs. Of course, we have our own methodologies at Braver Angels, and I would talk about these, wherein, I'll put it to you bluntly, for some practitioners of DEI, the goal is to get white people to understand that their privilege and pre-existing status means that they have a lesser place to occupy in a conversation among peers in a given institutional setting. Now, I can agree that historically and socially, there's this power differential which we need to keep in mind as the context of any number of policy making and politically related topics that we might be engaging in conversation or deliberation over. However, I had a person tell me that they, as a DEI practitioner, were concerned because they had too many peers for whom they did not consider their particular programs to be successful unless they managed to make a white person cry in the course of implementing them, right?
That just means that those practitioners would be wrong.
Well, I agree with that. The question, of course, becomes how widespread is that sort of practice. I don't think it's most DEI, and I think that there's a motivation to amplify that aspect, that malpractice of it, perhaps beyond what the reality of it might be. Nevertheless, I would say that on the one hand, Dr. King did not believe in integrating people out of power and so forth, and so he believed in equity, that diversity essentially without equity was vital. But Dr. King also did not believe in an integration that had us elbow to elbow, but not heart to heart, right? He believed in an earnest integration. So the inclusion part of DEI is something that has to succeed in making it possible for people both black and white and everybody else in between to feel like they are fully included in human dignity in the context of an organizational structure. So insofar as that is a way in which DEI can be practiced, and maybe it's too often practiced in some places, there's a basis for criticism of DEI, but I would argue no basis for suggesting that Dr. King would have had a principled rejection of DEI as a whole.
We agree on that latter part. I think the criticism, though, is searching for a problem. It's a critique searching for a problem, a solution, if you will, searching for a problem. I don't think there's any evidence at all that sort of bastardization of DE&I or its implementation is widespread. And this is the problem when people, create a boogeyman that really doesn't exist in the first place. If DE&I is right, and I believe it is, in its intent, then those practitioners who implement it the wrong way and then want to blame it for X, Y, and Z are just out of step and out of touch. But that does not allow one to, across the board, demonize a corrective program corrective programs like DE&I or affirmative action. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, Tavis, and I think that you and I share a common commitment to push back against oversimplifications and reductionism.
Absolutely.
And so we're on the same page here in our philosophical framework. I would say that I do believe that this problem exists. The question is at what level of scale. It's hard for me to give a precise answer to that because to a certain degree it's a hard thing to sort of study and observe. But I will tell you that in the summer of 2020, I had a wave of people reaching out to me personally in an effort to find somebody who could help constructively intervene in cases where this was a problem. So maybe my view is somewhat prejudiced by that experience. But if you look at a book like White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, you are getting that book is a bit of an analysis of implicit racial bias in white psychology, but Robin DiAngelo is essentially a type of DEI practitioner. And across the whole course of that book, she provides anecdotes of her workshops and methods being things that would sort of succeed in emotionally breaking down white people who are participating in them, but no recollections of success in terms of genuine integration of white and black people in organizational settings. And that, again, is an example of that problem.
Let's talk about white fragility when we come forward. Number one, I think there are two questions. You raised one question about how widespread this is. That may be a question. I'm not sure it is the question, number one. The question for me is, what is the end and aim of those persons like Charlie Kirk and Bill Ackman? What is their end and aim? It's not about they're using King as a way in, this attack on King as a way in, but ultimately they have a goal in mind, and that's what we're going to assess when we come forward. What is the goal? You're listening to John Wood Jr. on Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive. Unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is unveiling his fiscal year 2025 budget proposal. While releasing the $109 billion preliminary plan yesterday, the African-American mayor touted how his administration was able to balance the budget without layoffs, tax hikes, or major disruptions to city services despite obstacles like the growing migrant crisis. Well, winter weather is causing issues at airports all across the country. According to FlightAware, nearly 800 flights within, into, or out of the United States have been canceled so far today. It comes as over 1,000 flights have been delayed. Among the airports heavily impacted are Buffalo Niagara International, Chicago Midway, and Portland International. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Still seeing that tough drive across the valley floor for that east side of the 101. This was in Sherman Oaks where we had a tie-up. Sherman Oaks, Studio City, East 101 at Woodman. Crash cleared, but as far back as Balboa, the busy drive. Hollywood, troubles on the 101 south at Hollywood Boulevard, a wreck to the right side. Looks like that vehicle might be facing the wrong way. Pasadena, top now on the 210 west. 210 just before Fair Oaks is where we have a collision in the right lane. That is busy, the drive there from Mountain. And Cerritos, it's going to be a stalled car to watch out for on that 91 east at the 605. Clear to the right, but coming away from Downey, a bit of a downer drive.
Is this the This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Clippers got a spectacular performance from Paul George last night to beat Oklahoma City at Crypto.com. They won by 11. PG scored 18 of his season-high 38 points in the fourth quarter. At 26-14, the Clippers are just 2.5 games behind Minnesota for the best record in the Western Conference. The Clippers are 17-4 since November 30th. The Lakers are back in action tonight. They're at home against Dallas. The Lakers are trying to get back to 500. They're one game below. The Chargers are going to have some competition in trying to hire Jim Harbaugh as their next head coach. Harbaugh interviewed with Atlanta on Tuesday. At the moment, 5 other NFL teams are looking for a head coach. The Raiders, Carolina, Washington, Tennessee, and Seattle. Harbaugh's phone is expected to keep on ringing. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice, and injustice. The courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Ariva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Ariva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Right now, there are young people across the world facing a tough choice. Continue their dream of education or drop out to help their family put food on the table. You can help change their future in a single moment. See how far your support can go at unbound.org.
Every business seeks an advantage, whether it's having the best location, hiring top talent, or spotting trends before they happen. And now, the United States Postal Service can give your business a new advantage. Introducing USPS Ground Advantage. Reliable and affordable 2 to 5 day package shipping. It's the advantage you need at the price you want. Get the Ground Advantage at USPS.com/advantage. The United States Postal Service, delivering for America.
Jim Gaffigan here with some more Straight Talk. Let's take a moment to appreciate our sweet children, loving grandparents, and eternal soulmates. Now let's use them to save money on wireless. Because with the Straight Talk Silver Plan, you get 4 lines for just $25 a month with unlimited data and no contracts. So add those human pawns, loved ones, and save money. Thanks, kids. They're finally worth it. Straight Talk Wireless, available at Walmart.
Get 4 lines on Silver Unlimited for $25 per line per month, plus taxes and fees. For data management practices and additional terms, visit straighttalk.com.
Mr. Clean.
Of course I use Mr. Clean Magic Eraser to clean tough messes off my stovetop and bathtub. But then I discovered I can also use it to easily clean my patio furniture and even my shoes. I'm hooked!
And when wipes won't cut it, I use Magic Eraser Sheets. They're thin and flexible erasers, perfect for everyday messes, like gunk on my counters and sinks. They really are magical.
The reviews are in. Mr. Clean Magic Eraser and Sheets make cleaning look easy.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and John Wood Jr. as we were talking in this hour about where all this hate is coming from against one Dr. King. In case you've just tuned in, Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point, has made it his business to go after Dr. King. Very powerful and popular conservative with a pretty big base. His end and aim is to do away with corrective programs like affirmative action, DE&I, etc. But Dr. King has become the whipping post, and so he went in on Dr. King on Monday, on the holiday. No respect there, obviously, and is doing a series of conversations, making his claim, making his case about why Dr. King is bad for America, his view, his work, his witness, the seminal legislation that he helped get passed. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Charlie Kirk, a very popular conservative, going after Dr. King. Not just D&I, but King is the way in. And Bill Ackman, on the same day, the King holiday on Monday, was on X with Elon Musk, with his own criticisms of DE&I, and trying to suggest to the rest of us that Dr. King, were he alive, would be opposed to DE&I. So you got a powerful billionaire hedge fund manager named Bill Ackman on the one hand going after King and DE&I. He's the guy that helped push out Claudine Gay as president of Harvard. You got Charlie Kirk, who's a conservative, who's going after King from his vantage point. I should mention on Bill Ackman. Ackman just donated $1 million to a guy named Dean Phillips. Dean Phillips is a former member of Congress, Democrat, running against Joe Biden. So Cornel West, RFK Jr., they're running as independents. But Dean Phillips, former congressman, is running as a Democrat against a sitting Democratic president. And Bill Ackman just gave his campaign $1 million, but he comes out in an interview with Dean Phillips and Elon Musk. They're all there together. Dean Phillips, Elon Musk, Bill Ackman in this conversation on X on Monday, where Bill Ackman goes in on DE&I. I think Dean Phillips tried to push back on that a little bit, but the point is he still took that $1 million. So you see where his money's coming from. So there are all sorts of layers and textures to this conversation. Ultimately, what John Wood Jr., my friend and colleague, columnist for USA Today, one of the leaders of Braver Angels, what we're ultimately trying to get at least what I'm trying to get at, is what's behind the hate. Why now? And what is the end and aim? What is the goal of all the hate they're directing toward Dr. King? So you raised moments ago, John, the fact that there's a question here. The question is, to what extent would King be in support of DE&I? I think that question has been answered already. Number two, to what extent is DE&I being, manipulated by certain practitioners, which opens the door to people like Charlie Kirk and Bill Ackman who want to get rid of it. But there's a broader question here. And for me, that question is, as I said a moment ago, what is their end and aim? What is their goal in attacking King? It ain't just about Martin. It's about these corrective programs that they want to do away with in every aspect of American life. Do you disagree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think that that is the point at which Charlie Kirk and Bill Ackman converge, is with a desire to either eradicate or fundamentally downgrade the presence of diversity and equity inclusion programs across America. I mean, I don't think I look at Kirk and Ackman as being exactly the same here. I'm not sure that I see Ackman as having attacked Dr. King. I think that... But
attack DE&I, though.
But
there's no question about that.
Attacking DE&I, interestingly, through alleging King's opposition,
right,
were he to be alive today.
That's what I mean.
To DEI,
let me clarify.
Right? So,
let me clarify, though. That's what I mean by attacking King. You cannot take his words and twist them like a pretzel in a way that they aren't what he intended those words to be.
I understand that.
If you don't want to say attack, that's disrespect and flat out wrong. We can't disagree on that.
The charitable interpretation here might be that he's coming from a place of ignorance. But let's say this. One of the realities of politics and social life is that when we have a prejudiced understanding of a term, that becomes the only interpretation of the term. And so even if it's only 5 or 10% of DEI practitioners who are implementing these practices in a way that is actually destructive of people's ability to actually genuinely experience inclusion in the workplace, when that metastasizes into a political football, that becomes the only meaning of DEI. And so I think that's where Bill Ackman and others are coming from. Now, Charlie Kirk, I think he wants to see DEI undone. I think he's also realizing the fact that there is an untapped audience out there, potentially anyway, of people who have some genuine pent-up resentment towards Dr. King. And so perhaps part of what he's trying to do is build his own empire. But there is a broader effort to undermine diversity, equity, and inclusion in America. And my position on that is that what we want is diversity, equity, inclusion that actually lives up to its stated aims. Achieves those three things.
We want that. We want that. But there is we want that, John. Indeed. But there is no evidence, and you just threw this out there. And I want to just push back on this respectfully as your friend. Sure. I know you were just making a statement, but there is no evidence that it's metastasized. Mm-hmm. There is no evidence that there's 5 or 10% of people who are practitioners that are doing it the wrong way. There is no evidence of that, and to even suggest that in a sentence creates a frame that just doesn't exist. At the end of the day, they don't, let's call it what it is, John. They don't like seeing black folk get ahead. I just had this conversation with Randall Kennedy, professor at Harvard. He made this claim in a powerful piece that he wrote for the New York Times recently. Too many white folk in this country, not all, but too many white brothers and sisters just don't want to see, they can't stand seeing black folk get ahead, even if these corrective programs were put in place, because black folk have been perennially disenfranchised politically, socially, economically, and even culturally. They don't want to see Negroes get ahead, gain any ground. You got to call it what it is. It's not, there's no evidence of anything metastasizing here. There's no evidence that DE&I practitioners across the board are demonizing this program and making white folk cry. That's a narrative, but it's a false narrative.
Wait a second. I didn't say across the board.
Yeah.
I
well,
think,
5 to 10% is a significant number.
5 or 10% would be a significant number.
But that number, but there's no backing to that number, though.
I do think that it is a subject that deserves actual empirical study.
Exactly.
It deserves.
We agree on that.
It deserves empirical study because what we often do in politics is we respond to the emotional response, right, of people as they self-report their own experiences, right? And this is true for black people. This is true for people in any number of contexts. If you feel like you've experienced implicit bias, if you feel like you've experienced prejudice in the workplace, so on and so forth, you're having experiences that may or may not show up in a data set somewhere, but you're speaking from the vantage point of what you've actually lived through. And so there's no shortage of people saying that they've lived through these DEI experiences. And again, I told you, Tavis, I've interviewed a number of practitioners myself. I mean, I've tried to do in my own limited capacity, my own due diligence to get a sampling from experts as to how widespread this problem was. And there's certainly some concession that this is a problem with differing sort of analyses of how severe it is. And I also mentioned Robin DiAngelo's book. Now, you can go back and read Right Fragility.
I've read it, yeah.
You may recall her book, insofar as she describes her DEI methodology, is more or less a celebration of the very kind of, I would argue, destructive implementation of DEI that is problematic here in this context. So I agree with you that we don't have a firm evidentiary basis on the basis of data, but this is something that should be studied so we can have the conversation. And
I'm all for studying anything. All I'm saying is you cannot make a boogeyman out of a particular corrective program when there ain't no evidence that suggests that the program is being fundamentally misapplied or implemented in any way that's causing harm to white fellow citizens.
So allow me to launch my critique.
Hold that thought 1 second. Yeah, I'll let you launch it when we come forward. You listen to John Wood Jr. on Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good.
Yeah, man.
Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
The thing no one tells you about periods is that your flow changes every day, and so should your tampon size. Tampax has 5 absorbencies to match your changing flow. If it hurts to remove, go down a size. If it leaks, go up a size. Only Tampax has a leak guard braid to help give you up to 100% leak and odor-free protection. All-day comfort and protection for under $5 a month. Based on average U.S. consumer usage at manufacturer suggested price. However, pricing is at the sole discretion of the retailer. Excludes 8-count packs.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do Black history every single day. In fact, as the only Black talk radio station west of the Mississippi, we are Black history. Our annual Black History Month luncheon is fast approaching, and we want to be sure to give you ample time to get your company, organization, church, or group to join us at this year's celebration on the last day of the month, Thursday, February 29th at noon. Last year, we honored iconic local Black media personalities, including Pat Harvey, Jim Hill, Mark Brown, Beverly White, Sandy Banks, and Pat Prescott, and raised $20,000 in scholarships. This year, we're honoring Black Hollywood creatives who have used their artistic genius as climate justice champions. At this year's luncheon, we will be showcasing and sharing their inspiring work on our big screen. Plus, a scrumptious meal, live music, great company, and lots of fun with your favorite KBLA Talk 1580 hosts. So contact us today at info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. That's info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. We hope to see you Thursday, February 29th as we close out Black History Month. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
More of Tavis Smiley and John Wood Jr. I want to give John a chance to rebut, as he asked for a moment ago. In case you've just tuned in, my point of view very quickly, very simply, is this. I think the reason we're having this conversation is because in the coming months and years, you're going to see a lot more pushback on King, a lot more abuse of Dr. King for a particular end and aim. And I believe that end and aim is to do away with any kind of corrective program in this country aimed at African Americans. Your retort.
Well, the truth is, Tavis, my critique here is actually of the criticizers here. And so, because I want to show you that I understand the limitations of their perspective, even as I offer my own critiques of DEI insofar as I can see it. But there is, first of all, this issue needs to be studied in a way that provides a firm data set for us to be able to pivot from. Because you're right. I mean, I throw out the 5-10% figure and so forth as something that in my mind seems plausible, right, based on my own experiences and observations. But we need the data to undergird that, particularly before Bill Ackman or anybody else starts launching well-financed campaigns to utterly sort of undo it across the boards. But it reminds me a bit of the CRT conversation, very similar conversation in many respects. You have certain instances across the country where, well, in different places, different schools, different anecdotes that showed up in different places where you might have a teacher, let's say, this was a video that went viral a little while back, takes a group of students, different colors, and says, okay, are you a person of color? Are you white? Take a step forward, take a step backward. Are you male or female? Take a step forward, step backwards, this, that, or the other. By the end of it, he says, okay, depending on where you are here, this is how privileged or marginalized you are, and this sets up a social dynamic among kids, which is not very, very healthy. I don't know if that's CRT, but it's part of what people are calling CRT. If that's a problem, let's engage it. Then you have people say, let's talk about the Tulsa Race Massacre in schools because that's a part of our history. And you got people saying, that's CRT, we don't want that. One is legitimate history, the other is malpractice, right? We need a conversation that's actually able to discern between the two and identify how prevalent one problem is or the other is before we issue blanket condemnations of diversity, equity, inclusion, or CRT. We need to know what we are talking about before we adopt positions based on revolutionizing or undoing real progress that has been made in some of these different areas. And so that would be my constructive criticism to conservatives who want to be constructive about this. I don't know if Charlie Kirk really wants to be constructive, but for those conservatives and other critics who do want to be constructive, understand the issue, support establishing the evidence that's there, and then let's take it from a basis of truth and data.
Our remaining moments with John Wood Jr. when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful they saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles is a nonprofit law firm that protects and advances the rights of the most underserved, leveling the playing field and ensuring that everyone can have access to the justice system. Every year, LAFLA provides free, high-quality legal services to more than 100,000 people living in poverty across greater Los Angeles. Their unique combination of neighborhood offices, self-help centers at courthouses, and domestic violence clinics puts Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles on the front lines in vulnerable communities and at the forefront of change. LAFLA's expert team of attorneys, paralegals, and support staff works to provide direct representation, offer counsel and advice, provide referrals, and educate the community about their legal rights through workshops and seminars. With locations all over LA, you can access their services or volunteer to help no matter where you live. And if you have an urgent issue, call 213-235-0060. That's 213-235-0060. To get legal help, make a donation, or volunteer, visit lafla.org. lafla.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating. And so, as a Black woman in recovery, hope must be loud. It grows louder when you ask for help and you're vulnerable. It is the thread that lets you know that no matter what happens, you will be okay.
When we learn the power of hope, recovery is possible. Find out how at startwithhope.com. Brought to you by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, Shatterproof, and the Ad Council.
He's rooting for everybody black. Everybody black. More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
Just 4 minutes left in this conversation with John Wood Jr. Again, the reason why I wanted to have him here, the reason we've had this conversation is because I want to prepare you, to brace you for all the attacks that you're going to see increasingly against Dr. King, using him as a whipping post, twisting his words, all toward this end and aim, this goal of attacking and doing away with dismantling any and every corrective program in this country. Here's the evidence. Charlie Kirk, who we talked about earlier in this hour, this conservative who's doing a series of podcasts to this conservative audience across the country, attacking King, attacking DE&I. He hates the Civil Rights Act, John.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. He looks at the Civil Rights Act as essentially being responsible for the DEI establishment that he obviously is seeking to undo. And he doesn't seem to have any particular appreciation for the ways in which the Civil Rights Act allowed us to move a little bit closer to what American ideals actually ought to, and I think actually ought to be, and I think in fact are. Now, look, I think that you can make a case that there are certain practices, Title IX abuses or misinterpretations, that maybe stem from that era of legislation. Law can be implemented in ways that do a lot of good, but still have side effects that people do not anticipate. And so it's not to say that there are not critiques to be made, but there does seem to be a desire to do exactly what you said, sort of eliminate any sort of corrective apparatus or infrastructure or body of law in this country at all, for reasons that, we can speculate on, but that I think grossly dishonor and show profound ignorance of the genuine legacy and contributions and moral standing of Martin Luther King Jr.
Let me ask you this. I got 2 minutes left here. I am always concerned as a student of Dr. King and hopefully a practitioner and as an author of a best-selling book about Dr. King. Everybody knows he's my guy.
Yeah.
I am increasingly concerned, though, about the ways that these attacks will attempt to tarnish his image, tarnish and his reputation. I'm the first to tell you, you echoed this earlier, that King, to my mind, was a public servant, not a perfect servant.
Mm-hmm.
That's my view. He's a public servant, not a perfect servant. And yet I'm concerned about all these attacks increasingly on him and what that will ultimately do in terms of his legacy. That's my concern. What's your view?
And I had that concern, but I honestly, as it stands at this moment, I'm almost grateful for what Kirk is doing, because God works in mysterious ways. And I suspect that it might be possible that his efforts to, look, if the FBI couldn't do it, if the Klan and the White Citizens Council and Jim Clark and Bull Connor couldn't destroy Dr. King, I don't think Charlie Kirk is going to be able to do it either. But it is possible that he opens the space for a deeper conversation about Dr. King, which really this country has long needed. A little bit of evidence of that is that you did have, I noticed on social media, a lot of prominent Republicans and conservatives jumping on Charlie Kirk for attacking the Civil Rights Act and saying, well, if DEI is racially discriminatory, you should be supporting the Civil Rights Act because it exists to correct for any of those potential abuses, right? And so possibly shooting himself in the foot here a little bit. But insofar as he's decided to go to war with King, and maybe an opportunity for America to get clearer on who Dr. King really was in a way that allows us to elevate his life and legacy in a deeper understanding of what the man was really about.
Let me put a finer point on this as we close this conversation. I am concerned about it, but I ain't scared about it.
There you go.
I'm concerned, but not scared. I think in the end, that King's work and witness will always hold up.
Mm-hmm.
The more, to your point, people dig into his corpus, into his body of work, the more they will find consistencies all the way through it.
There you go.
Justice for everybody, love for everybody, service to other people. His legacy, I think, is going to be just fine. But it troubles me beyond words that we see these persons who are doing everything they can, again, to tarnish his image, and we'll fight back on that every day we can on this program. His name is John Wood Jr. He's my colleague here on my hometown station in L.A., KBLA Talk 1580, with a program on the weekends called The Reconstruction Project. For those across the nation, he is a columnist for USA Today. You read his work there, and one of the leaders of Braver Angels, which we'll talk more about next time you come on this program. Until then, thanks for your insights, and thanks for bringing us the down low on Charlie Kirk. Enjoyed the conversation immensely. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network.